析機総覧実験創薬研究光と真っ暗あまりそうだね
台風18号に伴う関東・東北豪雨災害を受け、24時間テレビ取引委員会は緊急募金を受け付けています。詳しくは24時間テレビ取引委員会のホームページをご覧ください。スタジオはスペシャルゲストにお越しいただいています。福男より女優の相葉咲さんです。
Director of Translational Research for the intramural program of NIAMS, and for the last year he's also served as Deputy Director for Intramural Clinical Research at NIH. I've known Dan for more than 10 years. I had the privilege of a little bit of collaboration with him back in the 1990s in research for one of the genes that I'm sure he's going to talk about today, which is responsible when mutated for a condition called familial Mediterranean fever. Dan has really established that whole area of periodic fevers, and a new kind of term that he invented for that, namely the auto-inflammatory conditions that include FMF and a number of other related disorders that have opened our eyes to a whole area of the immune system. Certainly, as many have pointed out, you never understand a system as well as when you have the opportunity to observe what happens when something goes wrong in one of the components of these genetic conditions, although rare, have certainly provided that kind of remarkable insight. Dan got his undergraduate degree at Princeton, his MD, PhD at Baylor, and he stayed on at Baylor to be resident and ultimately chief resident in internal medicine. But since 1985, he has been here at NIH in various roles, and I mentioned to you the one that he now holds, actually several that he now holds, playing a very important leadership role in clinical research here at NIH. He's been elected to membership in the American Society of Clinical Investigation and the Association of American Physicians. He's been honored particularly by the ACR Distinguished Investigator Award from the American College of Rheumatology, and currently is an NIH Distinguished Investigator. One of those terms, those appointments are reserved for our most highly respected and credentialed investigators here at NIH. So it's a great pleasure for me to have the chance to introduce him, and I'd ask you to give a warm welcome to my friend Dan Kastner.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Francis, for that very kind introduction. This is going to be a real adventure in many different ways. In point of fact, this particular talk is the first time that I have embedded a video in one of my PowerPoint presentations. And we've been sort of fiddling around with the audio-visual system over the course of the last hour, trying to get it to work. So we'll see what happens. If we don't get the video, I may have to recount to you what in fact happened during that interview a couple of days ago. But in any case, the title of the talk today is going to be Fevers, Genes, and History, Adventures in the Genomics of Inflammation. And basically what we're going to be talking about today are these diseases, such as familial Mediterranean fever that Francis alluded to, that have had really a special fascination for me for the last over 20 years now, and that have really been the subject of our work in the laboratory, looking for the genes that are mutated in these Mendelian disorders. And my feeble attempt at a pun here is history, so we're going to be dealing both with the histories of patients that have sort of gotten me interested in these diseases, and then looking perhaps a little bit at insights that we get into histories of human populations that we learn through some of the analyses of the genetic information associated with the mutations in these genes. So it really has been, over the course of the last few years, an adventure for me, and hopefully we will enjoy the next little while as we take adventures through time and space, both real and imagined, as we talk about some of these diseases. Now, perhaps if I push this button, it will advance, but I can see it won't. But the person in the back got the cue, and so we are now onto the second slide, which is the hereditary periodic fever syndromes. What are they, and why should you care? So, first of all, if we can have the first bullet here, these are disorders that are characterized by recurring episodes of fever with either localized and or systemic inflammation without evidence of infection or autoimmunity. Certainly there are no high-titer autoantibodies or antigen-specific T cells in these disorders. As you'll see, as you can have the next bullet, there are dramatic evidence of inflammation. So here are some examples of, in the periodic fever syndrome, some of the images that perhaps illustrate the dramatic inflammation that some of these patients can have. So shown here on the left is a laparoscopic view of the peritoneal cavity of a 7-year-old girl from California whom we saw a few years ago who has TRAPS, the TNF receptor-associated periodic syndrome. And this is one of the periodic fever syndromes that we'll be talking about today. She had had repeated episodes of peritonitis over the course of her young life and actually had developed adhesions in the peritoneal cavity, which are shown here, because of this repeated inflammation, this repeated sterile peritonitis that she had. Second image here is actually an echocardiogram taken of one of our patients with familial Mediterranean fever, a young man from Baghdad, Iraq, who was sent to us via London and then the Mayo Clinic with diffuse amyloid deposition due to FMF, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It's rare to see amyloid deposit in the heart in FMF, but in this particular case it did, and in fact this young man was in heart failure at the time we saw him, with an ejection fraction of around 37% at the age of, I think, 18 at that time. And here's an image of a patient with NOMID, the neonatal onset multisystem inflammatory disease, another of the recurrent fever syndromes that we'll be talking about. And this is basically a magnetic resonance image taken of the brain of one such patient. And you can see all the whitish areas here represent inflammation. This is chronic aseptic meningitis in this child. It leads to mental retardation, blindness, and deafness in these patients. So it's really a very serious and debilitating problem for patients who have this condition. In any case, as Francis mentioned, really we saw this as an opportunity, having diseases that are caused by single gene disorders, to identify what those genes are, learn about new genes,